Second verse, same as the first. I was way too early. Why is it that all the lights are always green when you're driving with plenty of time available, but when you're running late, they all turn red? Breathe, I reminded myself as I circled the block 3 times, ostensibly checking out the lay of the land. I did at least figure out the best driveway to go in to access the visitor's lot, and saw some not so crowded areas that might be available when I was ready to park. Finally, I pulled into the visitor's lot and headed towards the outlying section with fewer cars, pulling into a random spot with extra care and attention. I looked at my phone screen, 9:52 a.m. I sighed and turned off the ignition, put the keys in my purse, and went over in my head what I planned as my introduction one last time. Depending on the response from the detective, I reminded myself that I was free to leave any time that I wanted to. I took a few deep breaths, glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror and grimaced, then picked up my purse and got out, looking towards the main entrance to the station. Making my way through the 2 sets of entry doors, I placed my purse and shopping bag on the scanner belt to be x-rayed and smiled, a bit embarrassed at the security officer as I walked slowly through the metal detector. Safety before information for all government buildings now. I already felt defensive. I looked at the guard, who nodded that I could take my belongings, which I did. Then I headed to the counter in front of me that had a large information sign above a small glass window. I smiled again and gave the girl behind the counter my name, asking where Detective Lucero would be, and stating that I had an appointment at 10 o'clock to see him. The receptionist picked up a phone and entered a few numbers, then spoke quietly, glancing at me. I tried not to feel self-conscious, standing there, watching her, so I glanced around me at the walls where various portraits of what I assumed would be former police chiefs or mayors hung in rows. There was a section for posters from various assistance agencies, bail bonds, companies, and legal and related services. Yes, Detective Lucero will come get you. Go ahead and step to the side there. And she pointed to the left of the counter, heading deeper into the lobby area. He'll need to buzz you in, she added, smiling briefly at me. Thanks, I managed to say as I headed toward the designated area to await my escort. Breathe, I again reminded myself silently and tried to stand up straighter. It was only a couple of minutes before I heard an elevator ding and saw a tall man, blonde hair mixed with gray, step out of the doors. He glanced in my direction and nodded, then walked briskly towards me with an outstretched hand. Detective Lucero, you must be Miss Campbell. Thanks for coming on such short notice. Your car is parked in the visitor's lot? I winced and nodded quickly, my "oh yes, definitely, thanks," running together in one multi-syllable response. My face felt hot and I thought, geez, Elise, really? Get your shit together now. I chuckled and looked at him. Trust me, if I can avoid those kinds of situations, I will do so. Once is more than enough. He laughed and turned and waved me to follow him back to the elevator. Not claustrophobic, are you? He asked as I hesitated. No, I'm fine, I said to the floor as I stepped inside. He waved a key card in front of a scanner and pushed a button. The doors took forever to close, but they did, and eventually we headed up. I looked at the bag I gripped in one hand, my nails digging into my palms. I relaxed my grip the tiniest bit as I glanced at him with a smile. Sorry, I'm just not really good at elevator talk? No worries, I'm not a big fan of all that myself, he responded with a tired smile. The elevator dinged at that moment. I think we were both relieved to get out of there. The detective nodded again and headed down a hallway to the right, past conference rooms and rooms with computers and servers running along walls, past doors with signs that I didn't try to read, and past doors without signs at all. After several more turns, I was completely lost as we headed deeper into the maze. Eventually, we stopped at a door with a small placard that said, Detective Joshua Lucero. He opened the door and waved me to a chair in front of a small desk that was nearly completely buried in piles of paper and magazines and books, a monitor and keyboard in one small, clear space against the wall. I set my bag with the lens down on the floor next to the chair, hung my coat and purse on the back, and sat down. Okay, again, thank you for coming in, Miss Campbell. Just for the record, my office has video and audio recording equipment, and our conversation will be recorded. Do you agree to have our conversation recorded? Yes, of course. Thanks. He continued, "As I'm sure you know, I'm Detective Lucero, and I'm working on what the news is calling the Rosary Murders cases. As we discussed on the phone, I understand you came into the downtown Maine police station with a device that you think will be of assistance in our investigation. I don't have a lot of time. I have a meeting at 11, but why don't you give me a short summary of what this object is and how you acquired it and what it's supposed to do, okay?" Right, a quick summary of all of that. I nodded and dove in, doing my best to hit the major highlights of the White Room Dreams, the antique store, and my previous visit to the downtown police station. I figured he already had the report from the officers I had seen there and was just wanting to make sure I repeated the same information over time. I finished up and glanced at the wall clock. 10:07 a.m. I smiled at the detective and said, "Now, before we go any further, I have something I want to say. It will only take a minute or two, but I do need to say it before we go any further." "Okay?" He looked surprised, then shrugged and said, "Sure, go ahead, say what's on your mind." I nodded and bent over to open the bag, removing the wooden hat box. I held it up and gestured towards a shorter pile of trade magazines on the desk in front of me, which he obligingly picked up and dumped on the floor beside him. I placed the box on the desk between us. Looking him in the eyes, I began. "Look, I do not want to be here. I do not want to be involved with any of this at all. I am here because I started having these dreams and they showed me this thing, and then I found this thing at an antique store, and it is exactly the same as my dreams. I'm not a psychic. I know police use psychics sometimes to help in investigations. I don't know much about how this is supposed to work, but I am willing to try because I believe there is no way I could have dreams about something and then actually find it and have that all just be my imagination. Obviously, it's not. But if I can help make these murders stop, if I can save the life of just one child, I am willing to try. I will do my best, but no promises. I don't know if it will work or not. I just don't know, okay?" He smiled again, this time with a little light in his eyes. "I appreciate your candor, Miss Campbell. We appreciate any help that anyone can give us. We want these murders to stop as well. Let's see what we can do, shall we?"